different for this full moon to share? Anyone new to full moon meditation? Welcome, Saher.
Ram, I am new to the full moon meditation.
Okay.
But anyway, I had a wonderful experience. I mean, normally I used to get some thoughts because I'm a beginner, just a beginner. So I don't normally get into the deep meditation levels. But yesterday it was very good. I spent like 3 hours together. I was able to do it. So yeah, it's nice actually. Yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful. Very good, very good. Shall we start?
Yeah, sure. We shall start.
Okay, friends. So today we have, let's say, a double benefit. One is that we are doing a group meditation, which is thrice more powerful. And we have a live music that is further powerful. And over that, we are in full moon, which makes it thrice more powerful again. So let us all be in this space of acceptance. That is enough in order to charge and recharge ourselves. So take a comfortable posture, my dear friends. Cross your legs, clasp your hands, and close your eyes. We all are divine beings. Either we know it or we do not know it. Either we experienced it or we have not yet experienced it. So let us drop all our questions, all our doubts, all our limited thoughts, because we all are divine beings. There is no limitation whatsoever, whatsoever, whatsoever. Let me repeat. There is no limitation to each one of us in whatever aspect we can imagine of. Really, there is no limitation. What we know and what we are from our experiences of life are nothing in relation to what we really are, what we truly are. It is the same with each and every being, not just who meditate, with each and every one. whatever we know is a limiting factor. And the way to experience our limitlessness is to drop our mind. By becoming one with the breath. We all are limitless beings. We all truly are divine beings. There is no beginner. Divine being. There is no such definition. That is just the way we think. Let us all experience this. Let us all remember this truth. Every single breath we become aware of is a moment of union with that truth. Each and every single breath we are aware of. My dear friends, my dear divine beings, become one with your breath. The music only enhances our experience by reminding us to be with our breath. The breath is the bridge. The breath is the path. The breath is the key. normal, natural breath. Just be with your breath. Last 2 minutes, friends. Slowly bring back your awareness to your surroundings and to your physical body. As we end the session, let us all express our gratitude to each and everyone in our lives. Let us express our gratitude to each experience of our life. Let us be grateful to the Mother Nature and each and every being and non-being. Bring back your awareness. Last 20 seconds. Become more and more aware of your physical being and your surroundings. Last 10 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Slowly place your hands over your eyes for a few seconds. Whenever you're ready, you may open your eyes and take off your hands. Welcome back, friends. Hope you all had a wonderful meditation. If any one of you would like to share your experience, kindly unmute yourself. Or if you would like to ask a question, kindly go ahead. Yes, Ratnamala ji, would you like to share something?
Good evening. It was indeed a good experience. I'm doing it after a long time, say probably 2 years or so. And initially, of course, your mind keeps wavering, and then finally it comes to a point. So it was a good one. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Ram, this is Bala. I have, very like heaviness in my head, and also it feels like, I don't in Telugu మనం ఏమంటాము తిమ్మిరెక్కినది. The whole head is like, it feels like that.
Numb. It becomes numb.
Numb. Yeah, it's kind of numb, heavy. So it's still, it's the, like I feel that lot of energy, the whole head is very heavy and very numb.
Wonderful, wonderful, Andy. So as you just said, yes, you went into deeper states and you really experienced nice energies. So that's the effect of that.
Thank you.
Wonderful, Andy. Thank you. Thank you for sharing.
So
Anyone
we are
else?
having it
Masters,
every
Madhu.
day.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Yes, Ratnamala Garu, please go ahead.
Yes, please
You're
go ahead.
having it every day at 10:30?
Every day at this time, at the same time, we have it.
10:30 IST.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, Sahir.
Hello, Masters.
Hi, Master Sahir.
I'm sad. Do you know why? Because it was only 45 minutes, really. I wish this, in this special day and this special energy you sent, I cannot describe it, really. It should last for the whole night. So I will be replaying this on YouTube right now. I didn't want to talk actually in the beginning to not lose the state, because I wanted to continue doing this. Especially today, I don't know why I was trying right now before our session, the first, the Sufi dance, the whirling dance. So I was trying it for about 10 minutes or something. Then I started the meditation with you, with your amazing energy and music. I felt like I was diving in. I cannot describe it, Ram and Madhu. It was just amazing. Okay. But it was just one dive with the head on the chest again with your music. Like I said before, and I will always say, that's my ticket to the nothingness place or the ultimate, really. I can say it confidently without any exaggeration or something. I'm saying it is real like this. So today it was not only very deep or something, it was special. It was really special. I was there or I was here. Thank you so much. Thank you. I cannot thank you enough for this.
Thank you. Thank you, Sahir. And wonderful always to hear you and have you. So thank you for being part of these group energies. Thank you.
It's a pleasure for me.
Anyone else, friends? Any experiences? Any questions? Then we move into the next part of book reading. Okay. Yeah. Just a moment. We connect back.
Are you able to hear me, friends? Yes, perfect. All right. So, friends, I want you all again to close your eyes for some time till we finish reading this. However, it took more time than that. For wherever the Buddha went, others would ask him to come to their nearby town or village, and he was generous with his acceptances. Finally, a few months later, the Buddha sent word to his father, the king, that he wished to come to the palace to meet with him. King Suddhodana granted his wish in a formal message, saying that he would meet him in the receiving room of the grand hall of the palace. Pajapati asked that it be less formal, that they meet in the family rooms where he had grown up. He is the enlightened one now, Suddhodana replied with some sarcasm, and so we will welcome him as befits his status, with you and I sitting together on our royal thrones. Pajapati tried to reply, but he would not listen to her. The king and queen in royal robes sat on their high backed, glided chairs at one end of the long receiving chamber. The Buddha entered, far down the vast chamber, followed by four monks. The bright sunlight of the afternoon was at their backs, so the king and the queen saw only the five shapes in shadow, each barefoot, clothed in a saffron robe, and carrying a wooden begging bowl. Suddhodana again felt a surge of shame, seeing his son, the prince, reduced to a life of poverty and begging. The resentment of Siddhartha's renunciation rose inside him once again. Each step closer was like a jolt to the king, who sat upright as if to brace himself against any recognition. But as they drew closer, something else began to happen. Even before he could see Siddhartha's face, he saw, through the harsh light behind, his walk. It was different from any he had ever seen in his child, in anyone else really, in that it was what? The word that came was gentle. It was deliberate, yet there was a lightness to it. Calm, yet purposeful, without the nervous thudding step of the many supplicants who wanted something from their king. Just walking. Strange. And then the Buddha stood below him. Suddhodana found himself greeting him begrudgingly. The Buddha looked into his eyes for a moment. Holding his gaze, Suddhodana again sensed something else. But what? The Buddha, with a slight smile, clasped his palms together and bowed to his father. Then, looking into his mother's eyes, he bowed to her. Then again, he then again turned his gaze on his father. Sensing the depth of the Buddha's respect and caring, Suddhodana searched with his eyes for the young man he had loved more than his own life, and I could not find him. He was confused, even shocked at the change in Siddhartha, the blood of his blood. Speechless, he stood in awe. It seemed to him that it was not his son standing there before him, not really anyone's son, but a presence. He looked radiant, happy, healthy, and beautiful, full of life, as if his son had understood all the Suddhodana had felt and thought in that brief connection. He smiled and nodded, saying as clearly as if he had spoken it, all is understood, all suffering, all release. All is understood, all suffering, all release. I am here for you. Join me. And then Siddhartha turned towards all those who had come and smiled and bowed to each with as much respect and honor and caring as he had shown the king, his father, and the queen, his mother. The grand hall fell still. The silence was so strong, as if it were a great hand caressing. Siddhartha spoke a few words of gratitude for being with them again. King Suddhodana sent for Yashodhara and Rahula to come to greet the Buddha. Yashodhara sent a message back that she would not come. If Siddhartha wished, he could come to her. She asked Channa to stay with Rahula in his chamber and waited, alone. The king now felt deeply moved as he saw that his son had indeed become the awakened one, a king in his own realm. He was unsure of how to address Siddhartha, but invited him to come sit with him and his mother at the royal table to partake in a celebration of his return. The Buddha said, "We have eaten today." The king glanced at the begging bowl in his hand and said, "Our clan, the Sakyans, do not beg." "I am now one of those who beg." At that, the king understood that he was no longer one of them. He would not be returning to stay. He had a flash of sorrow and fell silent, his head down. All fell silent. "You do not need to suffer about this, father," said the Buddha. Suddhodana lifted his head to look into his enlightened son's eyes. "I am here with you now, and with my dear mother." He turned to her. For a long time their eyes held, as if time had stopped. Prajapati felt a rush of yearning to touch him, take his hands, and take him in her arms, as she had when he was a baby, a boy, and a young man. She took a step toward him to do so. She thought she saw a flicker of yearning from him, even sorrow, but suddenly she stopped still, an instant away. The astonishing thing to her, she realized only later, was that she was stopped not by his distance, but by his closeness, not by his reserve or stature, but by his kindness. His kindness, kindness itself. The Buddha noticed all of this, how old she seemed in body, but not in spirit or in love for whom he had been. He sensed her question of whether he now could be loved in the same way, and her realizing not. He felt her settle into being with him now. He saw something fresh in this woman, his aunt and true mother, a new awareness in her way of being with him, in her acceptance, her peacefulness, and her dignity. He smiled and bowed to her and the mother in her, and then he bowed to the king and the father in him. "We are sorry that Yashodhara has not come to meet you," the king apologized. "She has refused, and she has asked us to tell you that she is keeping Rahula away until she herself meets with you first." The Buddha took this in and said, "Then I will go to her." As he walked away with the monks, he said to them, "If she touches me, though it is forbidden in our Sangha for a woman to touch a monk, let her. Respect her grief and great suffering from my abandonment of her and our son." As Yashodhara saw Siddhartha walking toward her, she was overwhelmed with the feeling and fell to the ground sobbing. The Buddha felt the depth of her suffering, flashes of feeling her own, and then the compassion for all suffering. He waited. Finally, Yashodhara stood up and looked directly at him, searching to find who he was. There before her now, images of the past, of all the years with Siddhartha, the restless, tormented, sensual lover and husband, clashed with the now, this calm, open eyed, and fully awakened one, the Buddha. Then, now, Siddhartha, Buddha. Images flashed back and forth before our eyes, like light and shadow through leaves in a sunlit forest, restless in a wind. The monks were astounded as the Buddha stood there meeting her gaze, both of them in silence for what seemed a fracture in time, an endless and timeless moment. As the monks watched, to their amazement, a single tear flowed slowly down the Buddha's cheek. Yashodhara was unsure what it meant. The tear was her only glimpse into his sorrow. He showed nothing more, but stood calmly as the tear dried, leaving the slightest trace. His eyes had never wavered, a constant serenity and compassion in them. All at once, she understood that he was no longer to be her husband, Siddhartha, and she saw that he understood that moment in her. She was profoundly touched by his immensity, his abiding presence. She felt like a strong wind entered her body and lifted her up. Compassion, ardent, fiercely human. She had a sense of him seeing deeply into her own transformation, as if he, too, in that wordless moment, was seeing both the old and the new at once, and understood that she was no longer the young woman he had loved and left behind. She felt he was seeing into the depth of a struggle and the light of a spiritual attainment. And she saw so clearly that they were sharing a moment suddenly lightened with awareness itself, in and from them both. A moment of profound meeting and mutual recognition. It was recognizable to her, resonating with the moments of mutual understanding she had shared with the woman in the circle. I seeing him, he seeing me, each of us seeing the other being seen, infinitely resonating between us, time before and beyond time. In the last instant, she felt liberation from the past, breaking free and willing to let go at last. And then, in the most subtle movement of his eyes away from hers, the past stormed back in, and she saw again the boy she had fallen in love with, and the young man who had been her gentle, passionate lover, and the father of a child. Thinking of Rahula, she flushed at her son's loss and her own desperation and lonely rage at the abandonment, the betrayal. She glanced down again, afraid. When she looked back at him, she seemed to see in his face and eyes a slight shiver of feeling her pain. And then it was gone. It was time for Rahula to meet his father. Yashodhara called for Rahula. The boy, now 7 years old, came with Channa, but was shy and hid behind his mother. She said to him with a quiet power and equanimity, Your father is here. The boy kept his eyes cast down. Eventually, his mother's loving encouragement and the Buddha's gentleness and grace helped Rahula to approach his father. Receive him as your father, she said to Rahula. Claim your inheritance. What does that mean, mother? She explained it to him. As she spoke, the Buddha was moved, understanding that she had protected and nurtured his son to be ready to receive his father, to neither hate him nor reject him. The Buddha held out his begging bowl and smiled. Rahula hesitantly smiled back and wondered what to do. The Buddha offered him the bowl. He took it shyly. The Buddha smiled again and nodded, then turned to leave. Yashodhara could not believe that he was leaving again, not so much leaving her as leaving Rahula, without acknowledging what he had done or what had happened to her and their son. I must have another meeting with you, she said. He turned back to her. It will be best if we are alone, tomorrow, in our pine grove. He nodded, and then for the first time he spoke. Yes, I will meet you alone there tomorrow at dusk. He and the monks walked away. Yashodhara's heart rose up into her throat, and a flush went through her whole body. It is the same voice as my beloved Siddhartha. In the midst of all that has changed and is new, his voice still is as it was. Her love for him ignited and filled the world, the solid ground under her. She felt her child's hand in hers, squeezing. Rahula was looking up at her in puzzlement, the wooden bowl in his other hand. Solid ground once again. Siddhartha did come alone. Yashodhara had regained her strength and clarity since the previous day and invited him to sit with her in the pine grove that had been their special place always. They walked to where the cushions were arranged in a circle. He took a seat a few cushions away from her. They sat together alone, in silence, each of them feeling the new power of the place that had been sanctified with their love, their youth and marriage, and the birth of Rahula. Her eyes were upon him, his eyes closed in meditation. When he finally opened his eyes, she said, I have heard from Channa about your teachings. With Channa's instructions, we have tried to practice them here. I'm happy about that, he said, smiling. The voice had only a hint of her Siddhartha. There was a long pause as they looked at each other. She yearned to break the barrier between this Buddha and her own Siddhartha, but somehow dared not. There was a majesty about him now, not a kingly majesty, but a holy one. At last she spoke, choosing her words as if they were fragile and needed to be placed in the air carefully, lest they break the familiar sacred power of the silence. After you left, Siddhartha, she stopped, wondering if he would have a reaction to using his name. He smiled a broad, expansive smile and nodded for her. Go on. My desperation, my desperate suffering brought out from Pajapati and all the women an astonishing compassion. What Channa says you have taught as a force of loving kindness. It saved my life and the life of our child. It began a shared journey we have walked together for these 7 years since. We have called it the path of right relation. Can I tell you about it? His eyes brightened at this, and he said, Yes, tell me what you have found. And so she told him about it, the sacred practice of the circle, and of their journey in relation, including the king, Channa, and the other servants, both women and men. She made amends, asked for forgiveness for her suspicion and doubt of him after he left, and for how her suffering had ignited that of all of those who loved him in the palace community. He listened and said, I, too, am making amends now to you and through you to the others. Dear one, I am profoundly sorry. She was astonished at his words. Fresh tears came to her eyes, tears of relief and gratitude. They seemed to see deeply together. The suchness, the way that life had moved them both to this exquisite moment. Just this. You, the Buddha, I, I. Words failed her, and she blushed. He smiled in a way that she seemed to carry their love timelessly, a blanket. And you are, she went on. Despite my best right intention, you are the person who will always be my beloved. He laughed and gently nodded. You have described the truths that will end suffering. The path is the one you yourself took alone, leaving the worldly things behind. The path of he who goes forth, sitting in meditation until the end of suffering become clear, and then offering this to all beings. It is a blessing to all. She paused, suddenly nervous about asking this great man to hear what she had come to feel as a sacred learning for her and of all the women inquirers. And she said, It is not just the women who have followed the path of right relation. I have sat here in the circle with Channa, your mother and father, and Rahula, all of us on the same level, and they have all benefited from the circle. None of them had to leave their lives here to become more awakened and alive. Channa and I have shared what we call a spiritual friendship. And you know how rare that is between a woman and a man. You and I had the beginning of it, I think, in our love, when we declared ourselves spiritual friends. She worried that she had offended him. But there was no sign of that. My question to you, dear one, is this: is there another path, the path of she who stays, the path of right relation? Is it necessary to go forth alone and leave all you love behind in order to be holy and whole? His face showed a shimmer like the mirror of a pond, disturbed not by a stone thrown in or a wind, but by a surface breeze. Or is it possible to live in the world? She went on. To live deeply and truly in the everyday suffering of the world, to stay with others, and to walk through that together into awakening. The path that we women have walked, perhaps always, but which has not yet been illuminated as a holy path. Can there not be a practical path walked hand in hand with ordinary, particular ones, one by one, family by family, community by community with others, to the end of suffering? She took a deep breath in and let it out slowly. This path, perhaps, this hidden path, hidden from the eyes of the great world, is this not a true sacred path and holy life, as much as a monastic? He sat absolutely still. She waited. Finally, he spoke. Your journey, Yashodhara, is deep and strong. You and the others have discovered this for yourself, and as I have for myself and all beings. I offer you my teachings. I have taught the three jewels, three refuges of this path, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And you have begun with the Sangha, with the wisdom and compassion arising within community. It is one path with many doorways. And I also teach, he paused, then said, that spiritual friendship is the whole of the holy life. She realized that he was reminding her of what she had always been to him and would always be, that spiritual friend. Both smiled. She went on, dear one, what might be of benefit? What teaching and practices offered had two or more sat together under the Bodhi tree? Can these paths be woven together? He was silent for a long moment. She sensed the depth of his considering this, and then she spoke to him from the most tender place in her heart. Can we go forth together now? It was a moment as charged as that between life and death. Finally, he said, we will see what will be seen. This is only to be understood in the unfolding. Yashodhara, she who stays, follow your teaching and live your understanding with all your heart. She who stays, follow your teaching and live your understanding with all your heart. They looked into each other's eyes. Then he closed his in meditation. She looked at him, sitting there at peace, took this dear being in with all her heart, and then she closed her eyes too. Now, telling the story to at Prajapati's deathbed, Yashodhara paused, at peace. Tears pooled in her eyes, eased down her cheeks. He and I sat together in that empty circle for a long time in the stillness. She went on. The silence was filled with all things, a depth of care and gratitude, an awareness of shared grief, of immense loss, of the suchness of this worldly life. She glanced at Pajapati. When I opened my eyes again, he was gone. She paused, nodding. Again, there was no goodbye. In his presence in the circle, I had entered a timeless state. It might have been minutes or hours. I heard Rahula call me, and I called out, I'm here. As I waited for him to come to me, I felt this incredible mixture of joy and sorrow. She sat before us, radiant, then her face dropped in sadness. She said softly, I knew that would be the last time I would ever see him or speak with him alone. I felt happiness, but tears came too. Tears were in her eyes as she spoke to us again. And then, sisters, I heard a voice, Mama. My treasured son was standing at the edge of the circle, trying to find me, the begging bowl still grasped in his hand. He saw my tears, and he ran across the circle to me as fast as he could, and I lifted him up into my arms. Early the next morning, Channa reported that the Buddha and his 4 monks had left during the night to join the larger Sangha, which had been encamped in a vast mango grove owned by a wealthy landowner who had embraced the Dharma. It was a week's journey at least, and the Sangha would probably continue to move north toward the mountains of the Himalayas. All those in the palace who had seen him had been awed. The royal family was astonished at the transformation and sad too. Rahula was especially excited that the Buddha was his father and began to talk about wanting to follow him, live in the Sangha of monks with him, learning the Dharma. He was told that there were no boys his age, even near his age, in the Sangha, and that he would have plenty of time to decide. Soon thereafter, war broke out in a neighboring state. Two women, a mother and a grandmother of a family of bakers, arrived at the palace distraught, telling of a desperate situation in their community. All the healthy men and older boys, including the leaders of the village, were gone to the war. There were shortages of food, water, and medicines. Two of the children had died, and one was deathly ill. It seemed that some terrible disease was spreading in the community. Could they help? Yashodhara had shared the story of her meeting with the Buddha with the other women of the palace, and her new vitality had energized them all. She seemed to have grown not only in the sureness of her speech and action, but in her physical presence. A strong, kind leader, she and the others became more and more aware of the suffering outside the palace drought, disease, violence, chaos, death, and they were moved to take action. Yashodhara and Pajapati went to the king and asked if he could do something. He said he would at least provide some medicines. Then they dared to ask for something new, something they had never done before. They told him that they felt called to go out of the palace and stay together in the village. They asked for his blessings to go forth, to see what could be done to help these women and their families and the larger community. The king had truly changed in his respect for them and granted their wish. Some of the royal women thought it beneath them to do this and stayed back, but all of them supported the mission. The women went out from the palace to the countryside village, bringing herbs and medicines and food. The situation was much worse than they expected. There were shortages of food and clean water, which bred rats and insects. A terrible illness had spread to the babies and small children. This led to panic. Conflict and chaos were turning families against each other in the competition of scarce supplies. The community was splintering apart along family, caste, and class lines, creating fierce enmity, hoarding, and violence. The community fabric was torn and unraveling. In the jasmine scented night in the bamboo grove, Yashodhara went on. There was a war between the women, which sadly reflected that of the men far away. We asked the women of the village to come together to create a listening circle. We called it a peace circle. Here, conflicts could be spoken and held in the circle, then sifted like flour through the inner workings of the circle so that something new could emerge, unseen as yet for the good of their larger community. At first, the women were skeptical, but they were desperate enough to try. Over many days, there were great difficulties and setbacks. but we held the vision that their differences could lead to reconciliation and healing in the circle. Keeping the faith in our practices and a vision of creating harmony, we gradually helped small groups sit together in huts and courtyards. It started one by one, small circle by small circle, and after a time, these circles rippled out to others until there was finally one large circle, including almost all, coming together in the shade of a bare mango trees in the village square. Order began to prevail. The women began to be kind again to each other. The glimmer of right relation and ripe moments on the path began to appear to many, and then most members of the community. It was remarkable to see our vision work. Yashodhara smiled broadly. Decisions were made about setting up leadership councils, allocating resources, treating the ill ones. Things settled. Order came. The power of giving voice to all in the circle in a time of harsh conflict and critical emergency surprised even us. Eventually, a new peace and wellness prevailed. We had indeed built a peace circle within which conflicts could be resolved for the good of the larger community. Over time, the fabric was rebuilt and people started to work together again. The able men were still gone, off to war. This was strangely a blessing, a rare chance to see the power of the women's circle expanding beyond our own power. It was an opportunity for the movement to explore this new way of making peace and solving problems. In this, our circle was challenged. We also had to work on the conflicts around what we were doing and find new ways together, sometimes blindly. Pajapati and I realized that enlarging the circle and growing new ones could benefit others, while guiding and strengthening our own path as well. And so we were given a vision of peace. Yashodhara went on, speaking slowly, remembering the gift of peace now, so palpable in the room as we gathered around Pajapati. Now we can see that our path began with our own Sangha, our circle, which held and illuminated us all and was something greater than us, all of us. And please do see, we learned that we can create and hold ever widening circles rippling out. What power there could be in that. Her excitement lit up the small chamber. After great conflict in community, there can be great release, liberation from suffering. Is this not the same liberation the Buddha teaches? The question lay in the humid, deep night air. A circle began in the severance and grief, and then opened into deeper levels of Sangha and became, as I have described to you tonight, the path of right relation. We began to see that expanding the circle in this way was our doorway to Dharma, the truth, and to the great peace and the moments. She paused, seeking the right words. The moments of truth are not already there in you or me, but are arising in the moments of our connecting and in our being with, in true community. These moments arise as a living field, energies of pure being, vibrating, alive, and connected, not simply within us, but between us, among us, holding us. She blinked several times as if focusing on something. We could call these right moments of awakening on our path. She looked around and saw that we understood. It's so difficult for truth to be seen fully by any one of us. To see the flashes and depth of the extraordinary truth the Buddha saw so clearly, we must learn to see with his Sangha eyes, listen with Sangha ears, breathe, laugh, and weep with Sangha lungs, love with Sangha heart. With a glow in her eyes, she went on. Now we must continue to cultivate the practices and walk the path of awareness and awakening in our Sangha. This, my sisters, is what we must never forget. relation, and Sangha first. All else follows, like the cart follows the horse. So that's all for today, friends. I hope you all have enjoyed. If there is anything that anybody wants to share, please go ahead and unmute yourself. Or if you're still in that mood, please continue being in that mood. All right, then. So, till we see each other again tomorrow, friends, tomorrow morning, do not forget that we have Master Yana's session at 6 a.m. Germany time. And we will again meet each other for the book reading session and a meditation session at 6 p.m. Germany time, which is 10:30 p.m. India time. And till then, have a lovely day, a lovely evening, and a lovely night. Namaste to all. Thank you, Debasmita.